Hey there guys, Spyra Bay here and back with another one. This time we'll be doing Yusuke's build for Persona 5 Royal. Now as always, let's start off with his stat spread. And you can see off the top of the screen, Yusuke has the single highest natural strength stat out of the thieves, with a middling magic stat to pair up with that. So obviously this makes him a very good physical DPS, or at least it presents himself as a physical DPS at first glance. He also has the second highest endurance stat, but this still pales in comparison against Ryuji's. So he's actually a pretty durable party member. His average agility at 61 gives him a good starting point for evasion and accuracy. So we'll see later through his kit, Yusuke actually has pretty good evasion stats, all things considered, with his passives and whatnot. Surprisingly, he has the worst luck stat in the game out of all of the thieves. And for a physical attacker, this means that Yusuke can't actually naturally crit very well. And finally, we can see at a very low SP stat of 262, Yusuke can't really spam buffs or his magic skills all that much. And this will actually impact his ability to support himself using buffs and whatnot. All that being said, Yusuke is looking like a pretty good physical DPS. So let's see what his Persona skill set has in store for him in the first semester. So his first semester persona is Goemon, and his trait is Scoundrel Eyes, which may slightly increase allies' chances to avoid physical attacks. This is a fantastic passive to have, or a fantastic trait to have, because it immediately makes all party members more durable per se against physical type of damage. From a resistance point of view, he naturally is strong against ice and weak against fire. For his first semester skill set, he has a very strong physical skill in Brief Blade. It's a great single target option. It deals 25% less damage compared to Ryuji's God's Hand, but it has a very high 35% chance to crit. His AoE's physical skill would be Vorpal Blade, and it has a pretty average 10% crit chance. Of course, we have Mabufudine and Bufudine to cover his ice skills for knockdowns. But more interestingly, Yusuke doesn't learn charge naturally. So you will need to go to the Jazz Club only on September 4th to get charge. And he needs this skill to even stay competitive with Ryuji. So this is a massive knock on Yusuke, because you'll have to remember to get this skill on him. He learns Masuku Kaja, which is one of the 3 Ma buffs in the game, and it is honestly the worst Ma buff of the game, as it only raises evasion and accuracy of the group. When we enter into his third semester, he gets Gorokichi, and his trait upgrades to Unparalleled Eyes, which has a higher chance to allow allies to dodge physical attacks. Once again, this is a fantastic trait. From a resistance point of view, he now nulls ice and gains a resistance towards wind, but maintains his fire weakness to fire. And that's why we need his evade fire passive, which you can get at confidant level 10. So a couple of third semester skills that he learns is his unique skill, Hyaka Ryoran, which grants a team-wide attack, defense, and agility buff for 3 turns. This basically combines his Ryuji's Mataru Kaja and Makoto's Maraku Kaja buff into one. And this is honestly a very great skill, albeit at a very, very high SP cost. Basically, not Ryuji, but Yusuke could cast this for 2 or 3, probably 2 at max, and he'll be out of SP. And this is a pretty rare skill because Joker would need pretty good, a very specific setup to do the same thing. Discounting DLCs, of course. He should learn Arm Master from the Jazz Club, which you can obtain on January 22nd. And this increases his bulk, which is important as Yusuke isn't naturally as tanky as Ryuji. You'll also want alley dance on him because since he already has a very good evasion stat as well as evasion trait, we might as well triple dip into that. And alley dance makes Yusuke an even better evader by reducing all incoming attack accuracy by half. And you can get this from the Jazz Club as well on January 15th. Now, Yusuke, as you can see, requires a lot of work to even stay competitive. But with the proper investment, he's actually a monster. Yeah. So he doesn't really have a lot of alternative skills I would consider putting on him, since a lot of his Jazz Club skills are more or less pretty important for him. However, you can consider Marakunda to replace his Masuku Kaja buff, which you can get from the Jazz Club on August 14th or November 13th. And this basically increases outgoing damage for the entire party. Assuming you pair him with Ryuji, who gives the attack buff, and Makoto, who gives the defense buff. So this probably is the only thing I would consider, but it's more like a placeholder until you can get his full third semester skill set. Moving on to gear loadout, Yusuke has god tier equipment, and it starts off strong with Senryo Ryakusa R. It has a paltry 140 base attack stat, but it gives a monstrous +6 in his strength. And because he already has the highest natural strength stat in the game, this just makes him an even harder hitting DPS. You can get this by itemizing Ame no Uzume during a fusion alarm, and the great thing here is you can get this weapon extremely early as the second or third palace if I'm not mistaken. It gets even better. With his ranged weapon, he gets Providence, which gives him 350 raw attack stat, but more importantly gives him a massive +13 in agility stat. So this weapon basically makes him faster, but more importantly it raises his evasion even further. So you can see how this melts with his kit extremely well. And you can get this weapon by itemizing one of the archangels during a fusion alarm that is shown here, which I can't remember the name. So for Protector, you will want to give him the Tantric Oath R as all the other boys in the group, and this basically gives him 350 defense, but more importantly gives him a magic damage reduction of a high amount. And you can get this by itemizing Satan during a fusion alarm, and you'll have to max out the Judgment Arcana, which happens automatically via story progression. Some of the accessories you would consider for him is the Black Moon R, and you can get this by itemizing Tsukiyomi during a fusion alarm. This is a fantastic accessory for Yusuke because it grants him Apt Pupil, which basically increases his critical chance. And because he revolves around a lot of high critting physical moves, it sort of matches very well with his already very strong kit. And to top things off, it also gives him a monstrous +8 in strength to further hone in on that physical DPS madness. A more general accessory I would consider for Yusuke is Hope Diamond R, which you can get by itemizing Hope Diamond during a fusion alarm. And this grants him the Regenerate 3 passive to keep his HP up across turns. And it also gives him +4 in all of his stats, which benefits his attack, his evasion, his crit, even his endurance and whatnot. So this is also a fantastic option on Yusuke to consider. Some alternative gear loadout you can consider for him is the Usumidori R, which is the highest base attack weapon, melee weapon for him at 340 attack, and gives him a high chance to inflict fear on the target upon a basic hit. You can get this by itemizing Yoshitsune during a fusion alarm. I'm not a big fan of this weapon because it only affects his basic attack, so it's here if you just want to have the highest number attack in the game. For range weapon, with his melee weapon giving him strength, with Black Moon are giving him strength buff, you can triple dip into strength by giving him the K Goho EX, which has a pretty decent 300 attack stat, but gives him another +5 in strength. You can get this by itemizing Vasuki during a fusion alarm. Moving on into his team synergies, we'll start off with the buff trio of Yusuke, Ryuji, and Makoto. Yusuke is the main DPS in this composition with his high damaging, high crit attacks, and provides Masuku Kaja for evasion, or you could go for Marakunda for even more damage. Ryuji, on the other hand, focuses as a great offensive support for the team with AoE charge, Mataru Kaja during his first semester, and his persona trait has a random chance to buff an ally's attack. Makes him a fantastic physical support pick. And finally, to complete the trio of the Masuku Kaja and Mataru Kaja buff, we have Makoto, which keeps the team alive via Mediarahan and has the defensive buff of Maraku Kaja. Not only that, her persona trait increases the proc chances of Ryuji's shock and Yusuke's freeze, and this makes this team very synergistic for a long time. However, I don't particularly think this team is the best in terms of raw physical damage, because for that I would like to introduce the Aura team comp, which swaps in Akechi for Makoto. Once again, Yusuke is the main DPS with all of his strength boosting equipment, and he naturally increases the party's bulk via his party-wide evasion trait. Once again, Ryuji gives the entire party charge and Mataru Kaja, as well as his random chance to buff an ally's attack as well. The key thing here is Akechi, because if you were to give Akechi a healing accessory like the Salvation Crown, he basically becomes a pseudo healer at that point. And because he halves SP cost, it makes Yusuke and Ryuji's SP intensive skills much easier to manage. Compound that with his debilitate skill, which reduces attack, defense, and agility of the opponent. He is personally my favorite way of playing a offensive healer in the game, and I use him a lot in the late game. And the cherry on top is that Akechi learns very solid physical damage via Leviathan, which is basically God's Hand but without the crit. And this allows him to capitalize on both Ryuji's charge as well as Ryuji's random attack buff during his damage dealing turns when he doesn't need to heal. So that's my favorite physical party. And to close things off, we can go through a report card for our Fox Boy. So In terms of raw damage, it might surprise some of you, but I'm giving him a C here because although on the surface Yusuke has insane strength stats backed up by insane weapon bonuses, he has a lot of things holding him back. Firstly, he actually lacks the raw damage potential of Ryuji, who has a harder hitting physical skill. More critically though, he does not innately learn charge, and this makes it so that he can't even rival Ryuji in this. So these are the things that are holding him back. But as I said, if you invested in him via the Jazz Club passives, Jazz Club skills, he's gonna shine about as good as Ryuji. For utility damage, he gets a subpar C as well. He has better utility damage than Ryuji because he has a crit based kit with a 35% crit single target physical attack. The sad thing here is that he's not a B or above because he doesn't really deal a lot of magic damage via his ice skills, so that's a slight knock on him there. For survivability, he gets a B. Good enough survivability with his second best endurance stat, compounded by his very high evasion. He has decent support. I would give him a B. Masuku Kaja is the worst Mabuff out of the three, but still pretty good, I would say. But Hyaka Ryoran is a skill that can only be replicated by Joker, and that is with a lot of pre-planning involved. Finally, he gets an F for ease of use. This is because if you were a new player going into Persona 5 Royal completely blind, you will basically finish the game thinking that Yusuke is more or less, for lack of a better word, weaker in comparison to like Ryuji, and that's because he needs the Jazz Club to work. At minimum, he needs charge to even compete with Ryuji's damage in the endgame. And because of that, I'm giving him a pretty poor grade over here. So overall, I would give Yusuke a C. Given enough investment, he's actually a very, very competitive damage dealer, deals crazy amounts of damage, and he has a very great persona trait. But that requires a lot of prep and planning beforehand. So that's all for my Yusuke guide. Sorry for the delay. I was a little bit busy the last week. So I'll try to make things up by doing a double guide release, with the next one being Makoto. So thanks again, guys, and see you in the next one.